But structure alone isn't what makes a screenplay stand out, especially if you're trying to advance in competition. And that's because readers see plenty of scripts that are structurally sound. The beats are there, the story moves, everything technically works. But the scripts that advance, the ones that stick, have something else underneath the structure, and that's the heart, which is layer two of the danger ladder. Anybody can come up with a compelling premise. You could say, what if there are vampires in the Mississippi Delta? That's a great conceit. But what separates a genre concept from something like Sinners isn't the hook, it's what the story's actually about. The vampires are just the vehicle. The real story is about identity, guilt, faith, inheritance, salvation, damnation. That's the heart. As an aside, this is something that Spike Lee does better than pretty much any filmmaker working today. His movies often begin with a compelling, dramatic situation, but what gives them force is the argument underneath about race, justice, complicity, identity, power, responsibility. The plot gets you in the door, but the heart is what stays with you. If you think of the spine as moving the plot from left to right, from start to finish, you can think of the heart as moving from the top down, from the macro to the micro, which is where our scene work is. A lot of screenwriting teachers and courses try to get you to do things like 50 character traits or 50 scenes that this person could be in, or 50, I don't know, thoughts that they've had in their head. All that stuff is great background work if you need it, if you need to get into the heads of your character. But the readers don't really care. I don't think if your character prefers strawberry ice cream over black cherry ice cream. They just want the scenes to work, and they want to be able to see that tension and those relationships on the page, and they want it to mean something. So I think all that stuff is fine if it gets you where you need to go, but I don't think it's necessary. What I think is necessary is understanding the top to bottom approach of the heart to make sure that each scene is consistent to the characters and pushes the characters forward, pushes their arcs forward, pushes their growth or non-growth forward, and gets you to where you want to go um, from a character perspective. So here's how it breaks down. At the very top, you have your theme, and I know theme is a dirty word to some people, but I struggled for a long time trying to figure out what that even meant. What is a theme? Is a theme a statement? Is it, uh, power corrupts? That's a theme, I guess. Or man versus himself would be, I guess, a theme if you want. But that's not what I'm talking about. I think movies don't function to make a statement. Movies function to answer questions. So a thematic question is something you can actually work with in a script from scene to scene that each character can play off of. And it doesn't have to be anything earth shattering. Okay. For Back to the Future, the theme of the film is pretty simple. Are we in control of our own fate? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, you have Back to the Future. If the answer is no, you have some sort of dystopian art house film that's super depressing that I'm sure I would really like. But so that's the thematic question, the big overarching question that hangs over the entire script, every scene, every act, every beat. From there, you have your characters, and this may seem like a lot, but when you map it out on paper, it's really pretty basic. But when you have your character map, you can keep coming back to it when you're not sure where to take a scene, and it kind of clicks. It all makes sense, and you'll see how that works in Back to the Future. But every character, protagonist, antagonist, secondary character, should have a worldview. And that's just like a motto, right? Marty McFly in Back to the Future, what do you think his worldview is? What's his worldview? Pretty simple. Boldness leads to success, right? Boldness leads to success. That's what he feels in his gut. That's why he acts the way he acts. Once your worldview is set for your character, the next thing you have to figure out is the character's strategy. This is what the character does because of their worldview. Marty McFly, worldview is boldness leads to success. So what's his strategy? How does he make that happen? Well, he acts fast. He takes control. He tries to push others into action, improvise under pressure, All of this makes him impulsive because he wants to be bold, he wants to act. So those are his character traits, but it's not this exhaustive list of things that you got to figure out. It kind of makes sense, right? If you think boldness is the answer, how are you going to be bold? What's your strategy? You're going to say, "Fuck it, let's do it." Right? Not going to jump off that bridge? Watch me, bitch. Jump off the bridge. That's bold. But it's also impulsive, right? So it could be a strength, it could also be a weakness. You don't have to get into any of that. You just have to be consistent with your character. So, worldview and strategy. For your protagonist, though, you also should have an underlying fear because that will make your hero character more defined and more well rounded. Marty McFly, he has an underlying fear, and I think you know what it is. Damn it, I don't want to end up like my dad. Right? He even says it in like his second scene. Damn it, I sound a lot like my dad. Marty's worldview is boldness equals success. His strategy is impulsivity and action and doing shit. But his fear, his underlying fear is, oh man, no one's ever gonna respect me. I suck. And everyone's gonna figure out that I suck. And I fear that my fear is that my future's already been written for me. I'm gonna end up like my dad. Right. So his fear ties into the theme of the movie with the thematic question, is our fate predetermined? His biggest fear is that it is, and that his future sucks. Your other characters can also have underlying fears, but it's not as necessary as your protagonist. Maybe your antagonist, if it's a really good villain. I'll make another video about how to create really compelling villains. But for now, let's just stick with hero character, underlying fear. Then you've got a couple other little things, like for instance, your character's function. Marty is the protagonist. Doc is the mentor. Uh, George is the mirror, the cautionary tale. Right? It's just kind of what are they what purpose are they serving to the story? And that's important when you're writing scenes because you want them to reflect that because that helps create conflict and tension. And the last thing that you want to consider is the type of arc that the characters have, even the secondary characters, because knowing that as you're plotting out your story beats, where in the story should they change or not change? Positive arc, they get better, they learn something. Negative arc, they learn nothing, they get worse. Neutral arc, kind of stay the same as they go through um, the plot. So let's apply this to Back to the Future. We already did Marty. Let's move on to George. George McFly. George's worldview, avoid conflict, right? Conflict avoidance. Absolutely. I don't like confrontation. Crippling fear of confrontation. No, thank you. That would be George's worldview. What would his strategy be based on that worldview? Retreat, submit, deflect, run away, all the things he does. I mean, think about it. When Marty sees him up in the tree, why is he in the tree? Why is he a peeping tom? Because he can't talk to women, right? Too much conflict, too much confrontation. I'd rather from a distance. I'll watch through the binoculars. Yeah, it's creepy, but it's one of my strategies. And then when he gets caught, and he falls out of the tree, what does he do? He runs away because that's his strategy. Avoid conflict, just run away. And so that's how he lives his life according to his worldview. It's his strategies. So you can see this in his key behaviors in the script. He's a passive observer, like I just said. He gets bullied by Biff, obviously. He fails under pressure until he changes. That's because he has a positive character arc. And so he changes throughout the story, and his strategies change and his worldview changes. What's his character function? He's a mirror, right? He's Marty's feared future, but he's also a proof character because he demonstrates the theme that if the answer to you can control your destiny is yes, George is proof of that. Sound good? What about Lorraine? Let's do Lorraine. Okay, Lorraine's a little tricky because I think there's some issues with modern sensibilities on how women are written, how they were written. What's Lorraine's worldview? Life should be exciting, but a girl's got to know her place. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that she was a stronger female character, and maybe she is, and I'm not seeing it. Let me know in the comments if I fucked this whole thing up. But Lorraine, pretty much her worldview is, I wish life was super exciting and romantic, but at the end of the day, girl's got to know her place, right? I mean, that's how she ended up with George in the first place. She's just kind of dissatisfied with it at the end, but she made that choice because, yeah, she would have loved it if he was more exciting, but well, already committed, so girl's got to know her place. So what's her strategy with that? Well, she's drawn to excitement, obviously, right? She's drawn to Marty. She's drawn to power. She's drawn to romance. She's drawn to all of that kind of stuff, and she reacts to power. Even at the end, she reacts to power, right? Physical power. But this is always reactionary. She doesn't ever initiate. The only time that she initiates is when she has the hots for her son, and that goes really badly. Obviously, she kisses Marty. She's like, oh, this was disgusting, what was I thinking? That's like the only time that she was assertive. After that, she's just kind of like, oh, Biff, don't manhandle me. And then George comes in and saves the day. She's like, oh, yay, George, wonderful. And then they're dancing, and the redheaded guy is like, ha 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 ha, and he pushes George away. And Lorraine's like, oh no, but I guess I'll just dance with this guy, until George is like, no, fuck off. And then she's like, yay, George again. So she would love to be romantic, but she'll take whatever's thrown her way. She'll settle for it. So I would say that her character type, her arc would be static. She doesn't really change. She just ends up happy at the end because the choices that George made him a better person, so her life was better. She was going to be with him either way, happy or sad. And so what's her character function? What's her function in the script? She is a kind of a barometer. She kind of tests the theme both ways, right? If she chooses her own fate, what does that look like? And if she lets fate choose her, what does that look like? Kind of tests the theme, pushes the theme in that way. And she's also, though, the catalyst. She causes the disruption by being drawn to power, because if she wasn't drawn to power, it wouldn't have mattered, Marty getting hit by the car, or being chased by Biff, and forcing them to get hit by the truck of shit, because she would have been like, oh cool, I kind of like George, is kind of quirky, I'd love to read some of his writing one day. She wouldn't have cared, but it was the power that was so alluring. And so so she's kind of like an agent of destruction a little bit. I think one of the only truly problematic scenes in Back to the Future is the dancing scene post Biff punch, where the redheaded guy steals Lorraine away for a minute. And I know why it's in there. It had to be in there so that Marty could see his hand kind of disappearing and kind of wilting and on the verge of death. And then George being like, "No, now I am a man for real," and he pushes that twerp to the side, and then Marty's like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, right." Look at my dad. I'm so happy I'm like him now, instead of being so upset that I'm going to turn into him. So I know that that's why it was there, but honestly, Lorraine is just like, she's just like going along with it, which is, I think if that scene, if that was written today, something as simple as like Lorraine just being like, fuck off, like he's my man, and George being like, yeah, like if they were kind of in it together a little bit to give Lorraine a little bit more agency, it would sit better with people. But I mean, she serves a purpose, and she serves that purpose really well in the script, and it is a product of the time. And what are you going to look at everything through a modern lens, or are you just going to appreciate what it was and think, well, how would this be different today? I don't think it would be that different. I think like one note on it, one tweak to it, and it holds up as a modern story. But that always bumped me a little bit, because he just knocked out Biff, and now this guy's like, oh, it makes him like wilt for. Nah, I don't buy it. It was all that was all for, because they needed Marty to look at his hand and have it disappear. Moving on, Doc Brown. Let's do Doc. Okay, same thing. What's Doc's worldview? Knowledge can change reality. He's a science guy, right? Knowledge is power, is his worldview. And so, what's his strategy to implement that worldview? He experiments, problem solve, analytical. He's always right, like thinking on his feet. Like, how do I do this? How do I do that? What's the problem here? How can I fix that? Look, even when he's stuck on the clock tower, he's looking at all the pieces to figure out how to put it together. That's why in the beginning you got this Rube Goldberg machine to feed the dog, because he's always thinking about all this shit, because that's his worldview is knowledge, experimentation, science. So everything he does falls into that. And how is this seen in key behaviors? Well, he does invent a time machine, right? and he also comes up with the lightning plan. And he also refuses to look at the letter initially because he's a man of science and he doesn't want to fuck with anything. And so his arc is pretty flat except for that part. Makes him kind of positive. Slightly positive arc because he does get over himself at the end, read the letter, and survive the being shot by the Libyans. Doc Brown in 1955, when Marty met him, would have never done that because, I'm a man of science, even though he's creating a time machine that can fuck everything up. If he steps on a bug, he's kid. So it is a positive arc. And obviously his character function, he's a mentor. He's the mentor character. He's Yoda, is what he is. This stuff translates to any movie, any film, really. The mentor character. What about our bad guy, Mr. Biff? What about Biff Tannen? Obviously, he's the antagonist and the foil for Marty. That would be his character type. He's the foil, the antagonist. What's his worldview? Only the strong survive, right? Power through force is Biff's worldview. Be the toughest, be the strongest. Fear is better than respect. Bully mentality. That's Biff, is the bully mentality. So what's his strategy? Be a bully. Dominate, intimidate, control through fear. Standard bully stuff, right? And that's what he does. Look at his behavior. He bullies George. He controls his environment. His thugs, Billy Zane, guy with the glasses. He lies. He manipulates, right? He's just a bully. All of the behaviors and strategies match, or consistent with being a bully. And so his archetype is static. He never changes. He never changes. What changes is his position in the power structure. So he always believes that the strong survive, right? Power is the ultimate everything. So when the tables are turned on him and George gets the leverage, George has the power. Future Biff, new future Biff, right? New 1985 Biff. He seems like, but really all he is he's still living his worldview because George has the power, so he has to be submissive because his worldview hasn't changed because he's static. His arc is static. All right, that's the stuff for just kind of like how put it on paper and map your character out. You can write them as a list, and Marty or theme up top, Marty McFly or protagonist hero, worldview, strategy, underlying fear, and then the other stuff, the character type, arc, secondary character. What are they? Are they a mentor? Are they a mirror? Are they a cautionary tale? What's their worldview, strategy? And you just do that. It's really not that difficult, and it takes a lot less time than mapping out like 100 fucking character traits and I chew bubblegum versus tobacco, whatever. Who gives a shit? Um, so how does this actually work? Right? Let's apply it. Let's see how it works in a scene. How do you take this and put it on the paper, not as an exercise, but as an actual scene? I'll give you 3 examples from Back to the Future. First one is Marty pushing George out of the way. So let's set the scene, right? What's the context? George is peeping, falls out of the tree. Marty sees George about to get hit by the car, and that is the moment that originally led to his parents meeting. And he pushes George out of the way, and he gets hit by Lorraine's dad, by his granddad, and that fucks everything up, right? So how does this push against the theme? What's the theme test, right? Can action disrupt fate? Is our future predetermined, or do our choices impact the future? Obviously, this answers that thematic question in this scene as yes. He changed something and it had a direct impact. His worldview, Marty's worldview, is boldness leads to success, right? Boldness, action. So his strategies are act without thinking, be impulsive, just take control of the situation. He does this the whole movie, right? He acts without thinking, boldness, even when he blows the speakers in the very first scene of the movie. It's because he dials it up to 11 like in fucking Spinal Tap, and he blows everything out because it's bold. Like, I'm gonna rock the shit out of Doc's house, and he almost blows the place up because he doesn't think. He just jumps into traffic, literally in this case. And so what's the result? George and Lorraine don't meet. Lorraine becomes attracted to Marty, and the timeline breaks. So the arc movement for this scene is that his strength, perceived strength, becomes his flaw. And if you think about it, how brilliant this device is in Back to the Future, mission one, like we talked about in the spine, is I got to get back to 1985. He could have done that if he had just went to Doc's house and left it at that, but he didn't. Because he's impulsive, because that's his strategy, because it reinforces his worldview, he acted without thinking. If he had, for a split second, thought to himself, whoa, maybe I shouldn't fuck up the way my dad met my mom. I mean, we just heard my mom tell the story at the dinner table. I'm living it right now. Maybe I shouldn't kind of let things play out the way they're supposed to. But he didn't think about it. I'm gonna jump in. So he jumps in and he fucks the whole timeline up, and he fucks up the first mission, and it forces him into mission two, which is, make his parents fall in love for real and improve everybody's life. So it feeds into the spine. That's why this stuff works so well together as layers. Let's take another scene. Marty coaching George on what to say to Lorraine. So the context of this scene is Marty's trying to get George to ask Lorraine out, and he wants George to be confident. How does this test the theme? How does it push against the theme? Can you force somebody to change their fate? Right? Can Marty force George to be assertive? Or is George so pre programmed to be who he's going to be that it's going to fail because it's meant to fail? That's how it's pushing against the theme. Marty's worldview is be bold, right? So if I'm bold, I have success. So if George is bold, he'll have success. So he's trying to force his worldview onto George. So what's his strategy to control the situation and to be bold? He scripts George's behavior. He feeds him lines. He engineers the entire interaction, right? And so what Marty's doing is he's treating confidence like a performance that can be copied, because he's not seeing that George has to make these decisions on his own. He's trying to still be bold. He's trying to still like hold on to that power. What's the result? Well, George fails repeatedly. His behavior feels unnatural. Lorraine is not convinced. And so this is, as far as the arc movement, this is the escalation of Marty's flaw, of Marty thinking that he can, in a way, bully George into being a better person. Marty at this point in the movie is doubling down on his worldview and his strategies because he's not ready to change. He's almost ready, but he's not ready. And so he's still trying to control the situation, and now he's trying to control another person. Which leads me to the third scene, which I think is one of the most interesting scenes in the movie because it's so contrary to audience expectation. And I touched on this in the Spine video about the punch. Right, Marty's locked in the trunk, and you would think this is being passive because he's not confronting Biff. He's not. The hero is not. Luke Skywalker is not fighting Darth Vader. What the fuck, right? Ben Kenobi's fighting Darth Vader. Shouldn't it be Luke fighting Darth Vader? Isn't he the good guy? Isn't he the bad guy? Right? The fuck? Yeah, no, it still works, and here's why. The context is Marty's locked in the trunk, and George has to confront Biff. So how are we testing the theme? What is the theme question again, right? Can we control our fate? We already know from previous pushing on the themes, Marty tries things. It's sometimes fate's like the theme question is like, yeah, sure, this works. Sometimes it's like, no, you can't control George's fate. You can only control your own fate. And so this is where his worldview kind of collapses. Why? Because his worldview is boldness and action. He has to be the one to act. He has to be the one to jump into the fire, right? To run into the fire. He can't do that now because he's locked in the trunk. When he gets out, he is forced now to do the opposite of all of his strategies, which is to do nothing. He's forced into stillness. He's forced to allow the theme question to answer itself. Can you change your fate? And what's the result of him watching George decide his own fate? Well, George makes his own choice. He knocks Biff the fuck out, and the timeline not only corrects itself but improves. So this part of the movie is where Marty learns that he cannot and should not control everything. And that is a huge shift in Marty's life. A huge shift in Marty's life. Um, which makes his arc positive and makes George's arc positive and Lorraine's arc static. She doesn't really change much. All right, so we've done 3 scenes only looking at Marty. Now let's look at one more scene, but multiple characters with their character maps for the heart and how that creates tension and pretty much allows the scene to write itself. For this, let's look at the cafe scene because we got all of our main characters except for Doc there, and they're all acting the way that they should act according to their worldviews and strategies. So, theme question: do we control our fate? This scene tests that question through social dynamics. Everyone is simply behaving according to what they believe, and that's what creates the conflict. Let's go through the characters. Marty. Boldness leads to success, strategy, push others into action, be impulsive, control the interactions, manufacture confidence, right? So, what's his behavior in the scene? He coaches George from a distance, he feeds him lines, and he tries to direct the outcome. What's going wrong? George can't execute the behavior because he's not Marty. Marty's trying to control someone else's transformation. What's the function in the scene? External pressure, attempt to control the system. What does he represent here? The belief that change can be forced externally. And then, of course, later in the scene, he's impulsive and he trips Biff and he tries to get in a fight. And he's Marty's acting like Marty, being a hothead, doing shit he shouldn't do. He shouldn't even fucking be there, honestly, right? But he inserted himself into the situation. Now he's got to fix it. What's George doing in this situation, in this scene? Well, George's worldview is avoid conflict, and his strategy is to hesitate, to withdraw, to avoid risk. So, how does he behave in this scene? He approaches Lorraine awkwardly. It's not organic. I am your density. The fuck, George? Come on, man. Right? He can't even say that. He can't. I am your density. And so nothing works for him, and he retreats under pressure. What's going wrong here? His strategy collapses in real time because he's trying to be something he's not. He's not ready to change. And so he reverts back to his strategies because his worldview hasn't changed yet. It's performance art at this point. It's not true change. What's the function in the scene? He's the source of tension, and he's proof that change cannot be faked or forced. It has to be organic. And what does he represent? He represents a character whose strategy cannot survive under pressure. His strategy won't change until he's ready to change. What about sweet Lorraine? Life should be exciting, but a girl's got to know her place. She responds to confidence, she moves towards perceived strength, aligns herself with power. How does she behave in the scene? She engages briefly, loses interest quickly, and does not invest in George. She is the barometer of the theme in this scene, and she is giving immediate feedback. And look what happens later in the scene, right? Marty acts, you know, his bravado gets the best of him, and she loves it. She eats it up, which makes George retreat even more because she's responding to power. Doesn't mean she's going to end up with the power because girl's got no place. But she definitely responds the way that her character, her strategy, her worldview romanticizes power and strength. So she's acting the way she's supposed to. Biff, his worldview, power determines fate. Only the strong survive. What's his strategy? Dominate, humiliate, assert control. So what does he do? He interrupts George. He commands attention to the whole room around him. He reinforces the hierarchy. And what is his function in this space? He's the antagonistic pressure. And he's a demonstration of a working strategy. His strategy is working up to this point. He is the strongest. Even when Marty trips him and he stands up, he's like 8 feet taller than Marty. He dominates him. which is why his humiliation is so satisfying to the reader and to the audience, because this guy he's just so fucking punchable, right? So you like it when he gets punched, literally and figuratively. So what's this scene doing? It's not just a fun scene, and it's not just dialogue. It's reinforcing every single character's worldview through their strategies, through their character traits, and that inherently creates tension. That's why the scene works itself out so well. If you were mapping out this scene and you had your character maps and you don't know what a character is going to do next, right? Think of the scene structure. It starts with Marty in the background kind of, directing George and seeing if it's going to go well. Well, that can't be the whole scene because we have to have some sort of conflict. How do you introduce the conflict? Just bring Biff into the scene. He's the antagonist. He is the conflict. But that's not interesting enough on its own, and you still have Marty there. Marty's not going to stand around because that's not what his strategy is. So now you have Biff acting like a bully, Marty getting pissed off. So what's Marty going to do? He's going to trip him, and he's going to take all the attention to himself, and he's going to try to act bold. He's going to throw himself into the situation. And then what's Lorraine going to do? She's going to be like, oh, 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 oh. Right? She's going to bounce back and forth because for a moment she actually does find George endearing. It just doesn't last because Biff interrupts it, and then Marty is way more exciting than George. So she gravitates to Marty. So I mean, you can see it all as just a strategy collision. That's all conflict is. That's all drama is. That's all comedy is. Right? The Odd Couple. It's just every single Pixar movie. Two characters with opposing worldviews and opposing strategies. And they have to learn to get along and achieve something. It's every single Pixar movie. It's Inside Out, it's Up, it's Monsters Inc., it's Toy Story, literally Cars. It's every single Pixar movie. They just do it so well, or they used to do it so well, that you don't even care. You're just along for the ride. Okay, so just to recap on layer 2 of the danger ladder. Layer 1 is the spine, it's the plot, it's your beats, it's what your movie's doing. The heart, layer 2, top to bottom, universal thematic question, all the way down to strategies and arcs. It's what your movie is feeling, and it's what your movie is saying. So what's left? The gravy, layer 3. That's a lot of the fun stuff and a lot of the boring stuff. So in our next video, we'll come back. I'll talk about the fun stuff, the setup and payoff, Chekhov's gun, bomb under the table, all that kind of stuff, callbacks, right? Going linear, going non-linear, whatever you want to do. All the fun stuff that you can still do and that doesn't break your movie. And then all the stuff that you should do, which I have other videos about, which is just controlling the art form itself, controlling your prose, controlling your blocks of dialogue, controlling your page count, things that as a storyteller you don't want to have to think about, but as someone trying to advance in a competition, you have no choice. You have to. And so instead of running from it, embrace it and just make it another layer. It's a polish. It's just a patina, right? It's just it's the gravy. So stay tuned for the next video, The Gravy. Until then, I am Matt Weiner, and this is Fade In, a channel dedicated to the art of screenwriting.